Well, I'm pleased to say that the GBNews pub is now open, and joining me is Sir John Redwood, Conservative Member of Parliament for Wokingham, and, of course, somebody in the past who's been Secretary of State for Wales in the major government, challenger for the leadership of the Conservative Party, Eurosceptic to his fingertips. Sir John Redwood, welcome to Talking Pints. Very good to see you. The thing that amazes me, I look at your CV. You know, you worked at Fleming's, you worked at Rothschild, so you worked at, very successful city institutions. You've got a very acute mind for matters financial. You've been in Parliament since 1987, so you are, I called you a veteran. I hope that's okay.
Well, I'm still learning the job. Every day I hope to get better, Nigel.
Well, good for you.
And I did go on to run industrial companies, which I found very rewarding and very challenging.
Yeah, so a long career in business, long career in politics. You've held ministerial position. You were head of Mrs Thatcher's policy unit, going way back to the days when the Conservatives were very concerned, and we will talk about that.
Yeah, I was a young man then, but she still took my advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, good for you.
You were as good as your last argument with Margaret. That was why she was a pleasure to work for.
Were you scared of her?
No, I wasn't scared of her at all. We had a very good working relationship. It was a different generation. But I worked out very, very early on that she was one of those rare politicians that you could speak truth to power as long as you did it privately and you were loyal around the back, which I always was. We had some really good arguments, and sometimes I persuaded her. It was a very interesting relationship.
Quite a feather in your cap, I would say. But how is it, John, how is it that somebody with all your breadth of experience in finance, in business, in politics, in policy, how is it that we have, frankly, we have had since 2019 some of the most inexperienced in terms of life and lowest grade cabinet ministers this country has ever seen, and you're languishing on the backbenches? How does this work?
Well, I don't think they're low grade, and
they are.
You need people of all ages and experiences, and how do you get experience?
People with no life experience. That's what I'm talking about.
You must ask the bosses that.
Rich daddies.
Ask Mrs May, ask Boris. I don't know. I'm ready to serve, but I'm happy to serve in the way I do. It's a great privilege to represent a constituency and to have your voice in Parliament so that you can get hold of ministers and you can argue with them over what they should do next. And that's what I do.
Which you do very effectively, and you blog and you're very active and all the things that you do. But John, you must think to yourself, here we are with a big Conservative majority with the freedom to start thinking, doing things, just as in the 80s, those things happened.
I was brought in to do some of the thinking in the 80s because we just won a general election without much in the manifesto, and it was a fascinating thing to be able to do. And yes, I want Boris and his team to think widely now. They were not backed by COVID. Any government would have been, and they had to.
I get that.
They had to stop everything and deal with COVID. But now I think there's this huge opportunities. That's why I blog.
So why are your talents not
why
being
I'm discussing with them things that I think they could do, and sometimes maybe they'll pick them up. Let's hope.
John, it's ridiculous that they're not using you, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that, Nigel. It's not for me to say. It's not about me. It's about the country, and it's about making use of this enormous trust.
A lot of people sitting
the country put a lot of trust in Boris and the Conservatives, and I think they were right to choose us, because I think every other party wanted to thwart Brexit and didn't understand the electorate were very serious about this, and certainly didn't understand the opportunities. I think now I would say to the government, be bolder, be confident, understand that people actually voted for something different. They voted for change. And we still got a civil service that's sort of trying to drag us back, trying to copy everything that Europe does and say that we're still really under European rules, even though we don't need to be. So I'm one of those voices saying, let's be bold, let's be imaginative, let's be sensible, but an independent country can achieve a lot more. And I think we've still got L plates on for this independent country business.
No, that's probably... Well, I did notice over the weekend, the Labour Party appear to embrace Brexit because they're advocating scrapping the 5% VAT.
Yes, at last. A tax they weren't allowed to change while they were in it.
That's right.
And the greenest government ever, which this government wishes to be, still hasn't taken VAT off insulation and boiler controls and lots of green products. Now, why not? That was one of the things that you and I in the Brexit campaign said, this is a freedom we have. If we wanted to welcome the Greens on board, and we said, look, one of the things you want is people to buy more of these things, so why are we taxing them? Answer, because the EU made us. So let's do that, please, Rishi.
No, I get all of that. But how is it, as somebody that, was part of that radical thinking back in the 80s, how does it feel to be part of a Conservative Party that is now clearly tax and spend, that has gone for state controls, maybe not as bad as New Zealand or some other countries, that has gone for this green agenda in a way that really hits some of those on the lowest incomes and some of those running small businesses? John, it doesn't feel very Conservative, does it?
Well, I'm arguing now, as you may have seen, Nigel, that one of the things we need to do is to get a stronger recovery, and you get that by lower taxes, not higher taxes. Now, I'm delighted when the Chancellor assures us all he's a lower tax Conservative. I say, bring it on, Rishi, bring it on.
Yeah, it's like Boris calling himself a libertarian. It's not believable, any of it, is it?
And so let's see which taxes we could cut. Because if we cut some of the tax rates, we would actually collect more revenue. Every time a Conservative government has had the courage to cut income tax, the amount of money collected has gone up.
I completely understand that, and I do actively follow what you're pushing out there, and I find it very interesting. But they're not doing it. And my question to you is, this doesn't feel it doesn't feel Conservative.
Well, that's why I live in hope, and I want to make sure more people agree with me, and if people do agree with me, write to your MP. And all my Conservative colleagues, a lot of my Conservative colleagues in private say, John, we like lower taxes. Well, I'm saying you can have them, and it won't be irresponsible to have them. Did you know, for example, I don't read it on any of the normal media, that in the first 6 months of this year to September, the Treasury has collected in £46 billion more in tax revenue than its forecast last March.
Yeah, I know, phenomenal.
Because we've grown a bit faster than they thought we were going to. So doesn't that tell them something? It should tell the Chancellor that if you get faster growth, the money rolls in. You don't need to put the tax rates up, because that's all before they put up corporation tax and national insurance. My worry is that putting up national insurance, which I voted against, and putting up corporation tax is going to slow the growth, and you might even end up with less money than you'd have got if you'd gone for growth. And I'm not satisfied, Nigel. All the time the economy is still smaller than it was just pre-pandemic. Now, of course, it had a big hit, and we understand why that happened. But I'm impatient to get us beyond where we were in February 2019. So go for growth is what you've got to do.
In a way, John, you've become a bit of a serial rebel, really, haven't you? I mean, you're there and you vote on things that you believe to be right. I don't know whether the party whips have given up with you now, but they must be getting...
Well, I don't want to be a serial rebel.
But you are.
And I give them the benefit of the doubt on lots of things.
But you are. But you are.
Because I do believe only the Conservative Party can see us out of this. When I see what Labour and the Liberal Democrats are offering, I think, my goodness, thank goodness.
Well, I'm not sure anyone can tell what the difference would be.
There's quite a bit of difference.
Well, there isn't very much. You know it.
Labour would lock us up a lot more than this government's been doing.
You're being very loyal to your party here. It's perfectly clear you don't think Boris is particularly Conservative, but he was elected for a purpose, and that was to end the agony that the country had been through for that nearly 4-year period, and it was absolutely awful. What was it in your career? I mean, 87 you get into Parliament, just the year before the Single European Act had been signed, and I remember I was working in the city at the time, and I had my qualms about it. I wasn't...
Well, I told Margaret Thatcher not to sign it. It was one of the rare occasions when she didn't like my advice, and she was under enormous pressure from the Foreign Office and many of the civil servants. So we had to sign this thing, and they told her it was a free market. I said, no, it's not a free market. It's a legislative grab. It's a power grab. And then I became Single Market Minister later on, and I saw at close quarters just what a power grab it was, and how insensitive it was, particularly to small business. It was anti-innovation, it was anti-different ways of doing things. Everything had to be standardised, and it had to be standardised around what a few big corporations told the French and German governments they wanted.
How did you vote in the 75 referendum?
Oh, I voted no, of course.
Did you? Okay.
Because I made the mistake of reading the Treaty of Rome.
Oh, gosh.
And I was hearing all these politicians, Labour were in government, of course, Labour and some Conservative politicians, telling me it was a free market. And I said, no, it wasn't just a free market. It was always ever close to union. Yeah. And although they hadn't fleshed out all the details, it was quite clear they were going to take us on a massive journey. And I always thought, this is not a journey I, and probably a majority of the British people, want to go on. And it's certainly not a journey we're going to go on if we're lied to about it. And the Labour government in 75 said, oh, no, it's just a free market and we won't lose any sovereignty. Well, of course we lost sovereignty.
Heath said the same thing.
Yeah, well,
Heath said the same thing.
Heath was honest.
Later he was honest.
Heath actually said that we were going to lose sovereignty, but Labour in government had the referendum to try and deal with a conflict within their own party, and the main establishment Labour people, who had to take on one or two of their own cabinet ministers, were saying no loss of sovereignty, and I never believed a word of it, because the Treaty of Rome was a journey to sacrifice.
That was the irony, wasn't it?
And that was why I told Margaret not to sign the Single European Act, because it was a sacrifice of vetoes and powers. And I even tried a compromise with her, and I said, given that they say a limited number of laws are necessary for the single market and we need to have majority voting for those, define which ones they are, and then we get our veto back thereafter. And they wouldn't even do that.
And then when she left, in pretty sad circumstances, pretty thankless circumstances, John Major's first speech, I remember it, first speech, and John Major, who we all thought was a Thatcherite, said we want to be at the heart of Europe. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. My heart's...
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. You know, we were told this was the heir to Thatcher, and but clearly he wasn't. So in the end, it's the mid-1990s, and Major, and you know, there's a civil war going on. It's been going on through Maastricht, but it never goes away.
No.
Never goes away. It's a fault line, isn't it?
Well, a lot of us couldn't take Maastricht because it was a very clear sacrifice of much bigger powers than the Single European Act sacrifice.
Well, that was it for me with the Conservative Party. I was done with it.
I couldn't believe that Conservative leaders or wannabe leaders would think sacrificing the pound was feasible.
I know.
Because I said to them, well, you must rule that out immediately. At least we got an opt-out from this thing. One good thing John Major did, which Labour wouldn't have done, was got an opt-out from the currency. But they wouldn't unequivocally say, we're never going to go into it. And I said, well, how can you still be anything like an independent country if you don't run your own currency? I mean, that, to me, was... And then I took the show around the country with others to keep the pound.
No, I remember very well, and it was a good thing that a lot of people united. I mean, saving the pound was our Alamein, in a sense. It was a very important moment.
And I always said that if we'd lost that, I'd have left politics. I saw no point in carrying on if you belonged to a country that didn't control its own money. Couldn't see that, but we won it, so it was a great triumph, so it was worth staying on.
Taking it back a step.
Yeah.
So John Major is, you know, clearly joining ERM has been a catastrophe. Yeah. And that was really, I mean, you know, that was...
And there's so few of us ministers against it.
I literally, from that moment on, I've never voted Conservative since. I mean, I may do again one day, you never know, but I've never voted Conservative. And I was a member of the party.
Yeah, sure.
You know, at the time. But in the end, Major says, put up or shut up.
Yeah.
And up pops John Redwood.
Yeah.
And I remember I was at Lord's. I was at Lord's. And I was
you remember Lord's, where you were?
I do. I was at Lord's, looking forward to a proper day out, and I get this message that, you know, Redwood's standing. Yeah. And then this sort of slightly unfortunate photograph of your supporters, and I think Tony Marlow had a jacket on for Henley because it was in June or whatever.
Well, they decided to make fun of that, but they were all Conservative MPs.
Yeah, I
had a simple choice. We invited any Conservative MP who wanted to come. I then turned up. I couldn't start my campaign by saying I don't like the look of these people. it all looked... That would have been even worse.
I know. It all just looked... And I spoke to Tony Marlow about it.
Well, there's Tony Marlow and Teresa Gorman who attracted quite a lot of attention. Yeah, I was very grateful they at least had the courage to put up, you know?
I mean, they were great people.
They were great. They had guts.
I know, but it was all painted out. It all looked a bit like...
Well, if it hadn't been that, it had been something else.
But
the major lot were very good at spinning against me.
But then you see, John, I then went through the same thing.
Yep.
That, you know, I was a clown.
Yep.
UKIP was a circus.
That's right.
Fruitcakes, loonies, closet races. I've been through it as well. Yeah. When you look back at that period, are you pleased that you stood against him?
Oh, yes. Because I'll tell you why. Because I think it achieved something, and I think it persuaded John Major he had to offer a referendum before sacrificing the pound. Now, I didn't actually think that mattered at all, because I knew he was going to lose big time. But it made Blair match him. And I think that was terribly... That's how I would defend what I did. Didn't get me anywhere, but it wasn't really about ambition. It was really about saving the pound. That was what the point of it was.
No.
And I was thrilled that both major parties, including the one who was bound to win the general election, given what Tories were doing, said they were going to have a referendum. And I think that was absolutely critical and healthy.
Yeah. Economics, John. quickly.
Yeah.
Are we headed for a period of stagflation? And we've discussed stagflation with the audience over the last few weeks. It doesn't look pretty, does it?
Well, we're certainly heading for a period of slower growth rates after the phenomenal growth rates of recovery, and we're in a temporary period of higher inflation. But I think we need to take actions, and I've been setting out some of those: lower taxes, dealing with supply-side problems, investment in the areas where we need more capacity to avoid stagflation. And I'm terribly keen that we invest a lot more in energy, because this is a country that was always rich in energy and produced all its own electrical power and had plenty of oil and gas and coal which are allowed to
So
do
nuclear?
this. Well, maybe, but I mean, nuclear takes a long time and is quite expensive. I think we need to get more gas out.
Yes.
And there are various ways of producing more gas. The immediate challenge is why not accept the Shell investment in the Jackdaw field, which would link into the Shearwater platform that's already there. I mean, the kit's already there. The pipes go past the door.
Well,
why is it better to import gas in an LNG carrier?
I know, Boris wants to import it. I mean, you couldn't invent some of this stuff.
It's not that I'm being anti-green. We are going to burn the gas anyway. We're not suddenly going to rip out all these gas plants. So why not burn our own gas? And we've only got half at the moment that comes from ourselves. And on electrical power, I don't really mind how they generate it, but it can't all be wind, because we just saw in September that when the wind doesn't blow, we go from 35% wind to 2% wind, and we got a problem. So we need a range of things, whether it's biomass or nuclear or new gas or whatever.
It was down to 4%, wasn't it?
It was under 2 at one point.
Well, that's what I thought. But viewers complained I'd got it wrong. But if you think it was 2, thank you.
Well, I watch from time to time the real terms thing, which they show how much are we burning,
John, what next?
What next? Well, I mean, this is a great country, and it's really a training programme to government to show how an independent nation has lots of exciting options when you're a great country like Britain, and how we've got to learn again the decent habits of how to make our own decisions, set our own taxes.
You are genuinely excited by Brexit, aren't you?
It's fantastic, but we need to use it, and we haven't used many of the things yet. But, in defence of Boris, he's done Brexit, apart from Northern Ireland, which we've still got to sort out, and he did the vaccines, and that was brilliant. They did something different. I'm not sure the conventional system would have developed the vaccine. So we know we can do it now. So I say take confidence. And if you can do it for vaccines, let's do it for a new energy policy or whatever it is that we now need to do to be a more prosperous country. And if you want to level up, it's about having a great private sector. It's not just about a bit of public investment, though that can help. And it's about getting everybody on those personal journeys. So we need to make the opportunities available. I think it's got to be a much better environment for small businesses and for self-employment, and I think they need to look at the tax and regulations on that. So it's got to be easier for people to work for themselves.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.